Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaste. Today we will discuss about the topic Evolutionary History of Ayurveda. I am Vaidya Ram Manohar, have been working in the field of Ayurveda since the last 33 years. Presently I am serving as the Research Director of Amrita School of Ayurveda, Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham, Kollam in Kerala. What is Ayurveda? Ayurveda is a holistic system of healthcare that has originated in India, and it boasts of an unbroken evolutionary history of at least 3,000 years. It's very important to realize that Ayurveda is not just a medical system, but a comprehensive way of living itself. If you look at the meaning of the word Ayurveda, Ayus means life and Veda means knowledge. And so Ayurveda translates as knowledge of life. What makes Ayurveda unique is its holistic approach to health and well-being with a focus on the balance within the body. So Ayurveda emphasizes that the mind, body and spirit are interconnected and that maintaining this balance is essential for optimal health. Now, Ayurveda is highly personalized. It has a personalized approach. It takes into account individual body types called constitution of Prakriti, the digestion capabilities of an individual, and it also looks at the mental health. These treatment strategies of Ayurveda aim to restore and maintain physiological balance, especially balancing digestive strength, proper waste elimination, and immunity. Around 3,500 years ago, Ayurveda, which is the ancient Indian system of medicine, started writing down its teachings. Perhaps its origin can be traced even beyond this time period, but we can't see into the mists of time. The available records included conversations between teachers and students and meetings where they discussed medical ideas. It seems that Ayurvedic education was based on solving problems, using books, talking, watching and learning from observations, and doing practical exercises. So the ancient Ayurvedic texts like Agnivesha Tantra, Bhela Samhita, Kashyapa Samhita, Sushruta Samhita, Ashtanga Sangraha, and Ashtanga Hridaya were created between the 15th century before the Common Era and the 8th century of the Common Era. So the Agnivesha Tantra later was expanded and came to be known as the Charaka Samhita. Today the Charaka Samhita, Sushruta Samhita, Ashtanga Sangraha and Ashtanga Hridaya are considered the core Ayurvedic texts. These texts are believed to be the works of the renowned triad of scholars Charaka, Sushruta and Vagpada. Over the centuries, these works have been enriched by thousands of additional texts that include innovative ideas, groundbreaking discoveries, and cultural exchanges. So during the 8th to 16th centuries, Ayurveda really took off. People were experimenting with new stuff and figuring out how to use it for medicine. They even started making medicines and writing down all the details in books called formularies and materia medica, known in Sanskrit as Nikhantu. Now let's have a look at the contributions to Ayurveda in the later period of its evolutionary history. During this period, Ayurvedic practitioners developed techniques for detoxifying metals and minerals, creating herbo-mineral compounds, and using them effectively. Important clinical treatises like the Madhava Nidana, Chakradattam, Sharngadhara Samhita, Bhava Prakasha, and Bhaishyaja Ratnavali were all written, which helped to expand Ayurvedic knowledge. So, what is very fascinating is that there has been a continuous updating of the knowledge of Ayurveda throughout its evolutionary history. New texts were written, new masters, teachers came onto the scenario, new knowledge was accumulated, the materia medica was updated. So, at this period, in contrast to the greater stride of scholars about whom we just mentioned, Charaka, Sushruta, and Vagbhada, in the later period there emerged the lesser triad of scholars, Madhava, Sharngadhara, and Bhava Mishra. And these scholars are credited with the works of Madhava Nidana, Sharngadhara Samhita, and Bhava Pragasha. During this later period, many Nikhandus like the Dhanvantari Nikhandu, Kayyadeva Nikhandu, Madanapala Nikhandu, Raja Nikhandu, and Bhava Pragasha Nikhandu were composed, and these are recognized as the major Nikhandus, which are actually works on materia medica covering this period. So these Nikhandus contain information about medicinal plants, medicinal substances. In fact, in Ayurveda, we use not only medicinal plants but substances derived from animals, from the earth, minerals, metals, and other chemical substances. So all of these have been codified and classified in the Nikhandus, which is today understood as materia medica. And so all these works testify to the continuous updating of Ayurvedic pharmacopoeia. And this is quite mind-boggling considering the fact that Ayurveda has been in existence for more than 3,000 years. So during this time, new diseases were identified, insights into pathologies, otherwise called as samprapti, were gained, and advancements were made in the pharmacological and pharmaceutical sciences. So these developments expanded the range of available medicines and further advanced Ayurvedic medical science. So the old system of education in India has caught global attention of historians. So back in the day, ancient universities like Takshashila, Nalanda, and Vikramashila were actually the go-to places for formal Ayurvedic educations. These were great centers of learning, and we see that students from all parts of the world used to throng to these universities in India seeking higher education. From the accounts of visitors from foreign lands like China, we get fascinating description of how education was imparted in those days in these university settings. So these institutions taught everything from the basic principles called tattva to the theoretical knowledge, shastra, and practical application, vyavahara, of Ayurveda. This is again a very interesting, rational approach of Ayurveda, that Ayurvedic teachings are organized on this three-tier framework. So behind every practice, what is called as vyavahara, there is a theory, which is the shastra, and all these shastras are actually based on the basic principles called tattva. So this gives Ayurveda a very flexible organization of knowledge, where it can be stable as well as dynamic at the same time. The Ayurvedic knowledge system is stable because the foundational principles or tattva are relatively unchanging, and these tattvas can be formulated time and again according to the needs of the times in the form of shastra, and from these shastras newer practices can continuously evolve, their vyavahara, and this is what has made Ayurveda a very dynamic and evolving system of medicine. So we also see that there were attempts to make sure that their teachings were legitimate, and these authentic writings of Ayurveda came to be known as Aptopadesha. So Aptopadeshas were the codified knowledge that was testified by the peers, the experts in the field, And so they carried certain weightage. And then the teachings of this Aptopadesha was actually re-examined and verified by the student through the process of pratyaksha, which is actually direct observation, and drawing conclusions from these observations in an inferential manner, which is called as anumana. But over the period of time, especially in the post-colonial period, there has been a shift to modern methods of education. So Ayurveda, which is a traditional system of medicine, underwent major transformation during the British colonial era. In fact, the British stopped the traditional method of teaching Ayurveda when the first medical college was established in Kolkata in the year 1835. And under the influence of the British, a college-based educational system gradually evolved towards the end of the colonial period in India, replacing the traditional teacher-student relationship. So this was a major shift, and this saw the integration of biomedical practices and insights into Ayurvedic teachings. And by the late 19th century, standardized college curricula combined traditional principles with modern medical advancements. So Ayurveda began to present itself as a unified medical practice, and we had in the 1970s the establishment of a body called the Central Council for Indian Medicine, which oversees and regulates Ayurvedic education in the country. Recently, a few years ago, the CCIM, or Central Council of Indian Medicine, was reconstituted as the National Commission for Indian System of Medicine. And under the National Commission for Indian System of Medicine, known otherwise as NCISM, there are new avenues and dimensions coming into the implementation of Ayurvedic education. So there have also been regional traditions. This is very, very important. Ayurveda always believed in global concepts but local action. So regional traditions played a major role in keeping Ayurvedic knowledge and practices alive. Like for instance, in Bengal, we have the great Kaviraja tradition. The contribution of scholars from Bengal to the development of Ayurveda is, of a very high stature. In fact, some of the great commentaries and supportive literature of the classical treatises have come from Bengal, and to mention one such text or writing is the famous commentary of Chakrapani Datta on the Charaka Samhita. If you come to Kerala, we had the great Ashtavaidya tradition, which are two major examples of regional traditions. The whole idea was that for people living in particular geographical regions, the climate, the natural flora, fauna, the environment in which they live are different. So although the principles of Ayurveda are same, they needed to be locally and regionally adapted. And that is how the regional traditions of Ayurveda emerged. Kerala stands unique with its own pharmacopoeia and the adaptations and modifications it made to the classical Ayurvedic treatments. Ashtavaidya tradition is really very unique to Kerala, where one Vaidya would specialize in all the 8 branches of Ayurveda. Ashtavaidya means one who is super specialized. So this idea of specialization and super specialization emerged in the Ayurvedic tradition many centuries ago. And in fact, Ayurveda, even at the inception, the beginning of its evolution, can be found to have divided into 8 clinical specialities. So that is why it is called as Ashtanga Ayurveda, and Ashtavaidyas are those who are proficient in Ashtanga Ayurveda, or all the 8 branches of Ayurveda. Now this made Ayurveda, such regional adaptations have made Ayurveda relevant to specific communities throughout the ages. There are also traditions unique to Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu, and the system of medicine in Tamil Nadu has its own identity and is known as the Siddha system of medicine. Now, Siddha system of medicine specializes more in the use of mineral and metallic preparations. Coming back to the classification of Ayurveda or its specialization into 8 branches, I would like to summarize. The great branches are Kaya Chikitsa, general medicine, Bala Chikitsa, pediatrics, Graha Chikitsa, which is psychiatry, Urdhvanga Chikitsa or Shalakya Tantra, which is a combination of ear, nose and throat, then dentistry, ophthalmology, and all the diseases that affect the supraclavicular region of the body, Shalya Tantra or surgery, and then we have Agada Tantra or the science of toxicology, and then we have an exclusively a branch devoted to what is called as reproductive medicine or Vajikarana, and finally rejuvenative medicine and geriatrics represented by Rasayana Tantra. Here is a map which shows how Ayurveda has evolved, and spread chronogeographically across the length and breadth of the country. This is a busy slide, and this is very symbolic and representative. You don't have to worry that you're not able to read whatever is in the slide very clearly. What this slide represents, we can see the map of India, and you can see across the length and breadth of the country a textbook being overlaid on this map. Now, if just imagine, India has one of the richest medical literature in the world. If we were to superimpose on the basis of the place of origin the entire manuscripts that are available in the manuscript libraries of India, it would cover the entire map of India. So this shows that from every nook and corner of the country, somebody had contributed for the knowledge of Ayurveda. So Ayurveda is not the work of one single person. It is the work of thousands and thousands of experts from all parts of the country, and throughout the course of more than 3,000 years of its evolutionary history. As you can see in the annular ring of the cross-section of a tree on the other side laid beside the map of India, these concentric rings represent chronological landmarks in the evolution of Ayurveda. And as you can see, if you were to place all the Ayurvedic textbooks around these chronological landmarks, we can see a remarkable continuity. During every major phase of its evolutionary history, some new textbook has been composed and written. And it is also fascinating to see that the epicenter of the growth of Ayurveda has shifted from different places across India. At one point it was Bengal, then it was Uttar Pradesh, in the region of Kashi, then it has shifted to Gujarat, and it has come down also to Kerala. So what we see here is a fascinating and dynamic progression of knowledge in the classical tradition of Ayurveda. See, these are some of the great names associated with Ayurveda, and if we could actually make a enormous collection of these names. One of the great historians of Indian medical literature, Professor Muhlenbeld, has painstakingly compiled the big names associated with the tradition of Ayurveda. In this slide, we have just mentioned a few illustrious names. Bharadwaja, one of the pioneers who, pioneered the development of Ayurvedic knowledge. Agastya, who was the propagator of Siddha medicine. Dhanvantari, the propagator of the surgical school of Ayurveda. Atreya, who founded the school of general medicine. Charaka, who actually expanded and edited Agnivesha Tantra and made what is now the most celebrated textbook of Ayurveda. Kashyapa was a pediatrician. It's really fascinating to realize that 3,000 years ago, Ayurveda had already specialized branch of pediatrics. Bhela was a contemporary of Agnivesha. Agnivesha was, the most celebrated disciple of Atreya, and what was actually his students' notes became the Charaka Samhita and the most celebrated textbook of Ayurveda. Sushruta was the disciple of Dhanvantari, and he wrote the famous textbook Sushruta Samhita, and he is hailed as the father of surgery globally. Vagbhada was a great Ayurveda physician and scholar, and he did a complete systematic review of all Ayurvedic literature available in his time and condensed and concised them to create two masterpieces, Ashtanga Sangraha and Ashtanga Hridaya. Madhava was an expert in diagnostics. Bhava Mishra was an expert in Ayurvedic pharmacopoeia, and Sharngadhara was a pharmacist and pharmacologist. So you can see this is the legacy of Ayurveda, and these are the great acharyas of Ayurveda. So what is interesting to understand here is that Ayurveda literary tradition has developed a very meticulous technical format for scientific writing. Today we know that if we have to publish a scientific paper, we have to follow a certain format. We have to follow a certain technical guideline to write a research paper. So Ayurvedic textbooks were also written in different formats. There are different ways of writing Ayurvedic texts, and they can be classified under 7 major headings. We have samhitas or compendiums, which are very comprehensive textbooks covering all aspects of Ayurveda. The Charaka Samhita, Sushruta Samhita, Ashtanga Hridaya are examples. Then we have the Nikhandus, medical lexicons or materia medicas, Dhanvantari Nikhandu, Kayadeva Nikhandu, Sodala Nikhandu, Madanapala Nikhandu, Bhavaprakasha Nikhandu, Saligrama Nikhandu. These are examples of Nikhandus. Then we also have writings where everything is condensed in a very brief way. These condensed texts are called as sutras, and they are representing the aphorisms or aphoristic way of writing. And 2 major textbooks are recognized in this category. They are the Ayurveda Sutram and Rasavaisheshika Sutram. We have glossaries called koshas, Shiva Kosha and Amara Kosha are examples. And then commentaries on the major texts, which are called as Vyakhyas. Ayurveda Deepika, Nibandha Sangraha, Sarvanga Sundara, Shashilekha, Jalpa Kalpataru, Ayurveda Rasayanam. These are all some of the great commentaries on the classical textbooks of Ayurveda. Some other types of textbooks were also composed in the tradition of Ayurveda, like Yoga Sangrahas or formularies, Bhaishajya Ratnavali, Brinda Madhavam, Yoga Ratna Samuchayam, Yoga Ratnagaram. These are examples. And then fascinating to see that there is also the concept of a monograph in the literary tradition of Ayurveda, and these were called as Prakarana Granthas, Madhava Nidanam, Sharngadhara Samhita, which are focusing exclusively on a particular topic, can be considered as Prakarana Granthas. So if you look at the overall evolutionary history of Ayurveda, what we are seeing is the gradual transition from oral to written tradition. We do not know when the oral tradition was initiated in the history of Ayurveda, but the first textbooks were probably composed around 3,500 years ago, and each text has a long tradition of editing and revision. The Charaka Samhita even was the original teachings of Atreya. It was codified by his disciple Agnivesha. It then got revised and enlarged by Charaka, and finally it was restored by Dridhabala. So you can see, a text to last for so many thousands of years and undergo editing and updating is simply astounding. The Sushruta Samhita was originally propounded by King Dhanvantari. It was codified by his disciple Sushruta I, redacted by Sushruta II, revised by Nagarjuna, and critically edited by Chandrada. So Sushruta Samhita also boasts of a long history of editing. The Kashyapa Samhita and Bhela Samhita are available only in mutilated form today, but they also underwent a lot of modifications, especially the Kashyapa Samhita, which was propounded by sage Kashyapa, was codified by his disciple Vritta Jivaka. It was lost and rediscovered by Yaksha, and it is today available partly. The Bhela Samhita it's also representing the teachings of sage Atreya as codified by his disciple Bhela, and this is also available only in a mutilated form. So we had a quick overview in the last minutes about the evolutionary history of Ayurveda. It is not possible in a brief discourse to cover all the essential points and the details of the fascinating history of Ayurveda. So here are some additional reading that will enable you to go deeper into the subject. Raghava Varyer's Brief History of Ayurveda and Subhash Ranede's A Textbook of History of Ayurveda can deepen your knowledge on this subject. So thank you so much for your attention. Namaste.